Control meeting for the Development B Committee. May I first of all remind you of some domestic arrangements. Toilets are situated outside the meeting room opposite the stairs. Cold water is also available in the breakout area outside the meeting room. If the fire alarm should sound, please leave the meeting room by following the fire exit signs and meet on the Ipswich Town Football Club training pitch. Do not re-enter the building until you are told it is safe to do so. Please switch off all mobile phones or turn them to silent. I would like to remind everyone present that this meeting will be broadcast live to the internet and will be capable of repeated viewing. The whole of the meeting will be filmed, except where there are confidential or exempt items. If you make representation to the meeting, you will be deemed by the Council to have consented to being filmed and to the possible use of those images and sound recordings for webcasting and/or training purposes. The Council, members of the public and press may record, film, photograph or broadcast this meeting when the public and press are not lawfully excluded. Finally, can members and officers please ensure that you press the microphone for speaking and turn it off when you've finished. Now move on to the introductions. And on my right, I have Ian Dupre, our legal officer, John Pateman G, our appeal planning manager, myself, Cathy Guthrie, I'm the chair today. We have Robert Carmichael, who's our governance officer. We then have Jack Wilson, planning officer. And our very able IT expert. We also have more members of our officers up here who will present. We also have, I see, a highways expert with us here today. Thank you very much. We have down here members of the ward representatives who will speak on behalf of the community. We have the planning committee who will debate and vote on the applications before us. And in the audience behind us, we have applicants, agents, members of the public, and people who've hopefully mentioned that they would like their 3 minutes to speak. Everybody's entitled to 3 minutes to speak, a supporter, objector, parish council, the applicant, and of course our ward members get a little longer. So, let's move on to the agenda, please. Do we have apologies for absence and substitutions?
None received, Chair.
Thank you. To receive any declarations of pecuniary or non-pecuniary interest by members? No. Declarations of lobbying. And for me that would be on the first application and also the Bilderston and the Ofton and the Somersham one. For me, is that the same for all of you? Any other lobbying? Yes. Thank you. Declarations of personal site visits. Councillor Matheson.
Just to remind ourselves that
just a declaration of a personal site visit, please.
At the last meeting, I declared that I'd made an accompanied site visit with the officer to the Somersham one, and I'd made an unaccompanied visit to the Ofton one.
Thank you. Confirmation of the minutes of the meeting held on the 4th of September. And I look from page 1 through to page 13. And unless there are any amendments, if you would like to point them out to me, are you happy that I sign these minutes? Sign them? Thank you very much. I'll do that during the course of the meeting. Thank you very much. To receive notification of petitions in accordance with the Council's petition scheme.
None received, Chair, but just to note that there was a petition associated with the first one that was the first item before committee that was reported the last time that it came to our committee.
Previously. Thank you very much. And the schedule of the planning applications will be the order in which they are in your papers today. So without further ado, may we move on to the page 5, and Jack, if you'd like to make the presentation of the case, please. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, members of the public. I'm Jack Wilkinson, Principal Planning Officer in the DM service for Babergh Mid Suffolk District Council. The first item is, as per your papers, it's land southwest of Main Road, Somersham. The proposal is for 42 dwellings, together with associated public open space, access, garaging, car parking, and this is a twin tracker application as a duplicate of this item. Members, you may recall that you undertook site visit on the 3rd of July and the item was subsequently presented to you on the 10th of July, but the item was deferred seeking highways resolution. So in terms of location, I will skip through most of these slides. Again, we have already been through this. We will come on to the main points in a second, but just to refresh your memory, in terms of the site, it's a 1.82 hectare site on the edge of settlement of a primary village. The red line outline as shown. The site is largely unconstrained, however there are a few features nearby that are relevant in what is ultimately your material consideration. We have listed building to the north in the form of the Duke of Marlborough pub. We have the cottage here on the corner, which is also listed. We have a public right-of-way which runs along the south of the site and which links off, as you can see, by the green mark here. In terms of the aerial view, at the minute this is open paddock land. The land does slope gently from the west to the east towards Main Road. At the minute the site is served by an internal road. This would be ultimately beefed up in any future planning application approval, and I'll come on to the access in a moment. In terms of links, we've discussed the Baptist church, the pub, community shop and primary school. And as you can see, the site outlined in red. So this is a full planning application with all details. Key features being the main internal road in, a secondary road linking off, independent driveways serving units, and public open space, which is a welcome benefit. There's also quite an integral landscaping component forming part of this application. The existing access, as shown, facing north, facing south into the bulk of the village. You'll note opposite the site is an established footpath. We did stand at this point during our site visit. And into the detail with regards to the access, there is splay provision set in both the left and right facing visibility splays, and that's at a 2.4 metre setback. This is above and beyond the highways requirements. So following deferral last time, we did go back and consult the local highways authority, and we did indeed discuss this with the developer. There's an amendment come through which does show the extent to which the footpath provision is provided. So if I go back to, forgive me, the previous slide, you'll see that the footpath provision continues around to the left, but it stops around to the right. This is in effect to be rerouted. So you'll see the footpath provision stops at this corner. Now, occupants would have the option of using the footpath over the road as existing. In terms of the actual width of the access, this is acceptable in terms of the visibility in both ways, as I've said, but also the functionality of that access to serve 42 units. Extending into site, as I've mentioned, we have the primary layout, secondary and third way driveways. We also have an opening towards the southern boundary whereby, if residents so wish, they could access the public right-of-way which runs along the south of the site. This is a welcome benefit. I feel this drawing is quite important in terms of an understanding of how the site links to the footpath provision. Now, as I've mentioned quite a few times, the public right-of-way runs along the south. We also have access through the site to this point, along opposite site, and also a detail here which I'll discuss in a moment in detail that is a benefit to the scheme. It's not fundamental, but it is a benefit to the scheme in terms of how the site links to the remainder of the village towards the south. So members may recall what may be described as a pinch point, which is towards the south-east, outside the red line, but nonetheless secured by way of Section 106 agreement that would be improved. Now, at the minute, I think it's fair to say that we have no provision along this stretch. Now, officers are of the sound opinion that this is acceptable in terms of whether the site is connected to the remainder of the village and whether you could reasonably walk. This has been revised and has come through again with a 1 metre wide footway. So residents would have the option via the yellow marked area to walk from site via the public right of way round and connect to the rest of the village. In terms of actual improvement, there would be dragon teeth marks which would slow traffic towards this point. There would be fresh printing along the junction, along with clear markings that would depict the footway which we have been working hard on. In terms of the actual width, it's a 3.5 metre width. This is acceptable and this has been rigorously tested and assessed by your local highways engineers. This is the public open space, which I've already spoken about. I don't think it's necessary to delve too deeply into the remainder of the matters that we discussed last time out, as it was principally a highways deferral. So I will skip through these images, which again show the site as existing. I'll be happy to go back to these should you require me to do so. The landscaping layout would be bound along with all conditions, hedgerow condition as well. And these are the proposed elevations. It's quite a good mix and blend in terms of what it is that's proposed. You've got good brick details, you've got good tile details, along with all the integrated garage features that would form either way of the dwellings. So the existing site, as you may recall, so just to summarise, this is a 42 dwelling scheme bound by Section 106 for 35% affordable housing. It's an acceptable density, good public open space, car park provision, along with cycle spaces. There are links, as we've discussed, and the provision in terms of highways and the footpath availability is above and beyond what the local highways authority deem necessary. It's a fundamental aspect of how we as officers consider it, and I trust that those material considerations are before you to enable you to make a decision. And on that basis, your recommendation, subject to the 106 and the draft headers, is for approval. Thank you.
Just before we go to questions, John is just going to add a couple of things.
Yes, thank you. Just in respect of your recommendation, just for the avoidance of doubt, we will be expecting a condition on the footway works to the pinch point, as it's been referred to, and protection also to be agreed, and so secured and details to be agreed, to the overhanging building that's on that corner of that point. So there are details there that we need to secure. We have obviously some of those details already with us, but in order for us to look at those and make sure that they are absolutely, the finer details of those are absolutely correct, that is a condition that is part of your recommendation. Thank you.
So before we go to questions of the officer, we have obviously been through this presentation before. Matters have changed. We do have the Highways Authority representative here today. But if you can keep your questioning to the application on things that you might not be clear on or that you haven't heard. So do we have any further questions? Bearing in mind we also have the ward member to speak, the applicant and any objectors. So any questions? Yes, Councillor Matheson.
Thank you. Yeah, on paragraph 7.4, the Sustainability Officer's objection, has there been any further engagement which might have reduced that particular concern?
In terms of engagement with the Sustainability Officer, we did talk with the officer who was in post, is no longer in post, and we have spoken with the developer on various improvement measures that could come through in any prospective build. Now there has been a sustainability statement included that will be part of the approved plans. I think we're fairly limited in what we can hinge for, but nonetheless that has been considered.
Yes, please. Well, it's questions for the officer of something that, I mean, I'm not going to have Sam present a separate case. You've got the debate to come forward and people to represent, so for the officer, you know? No? Yeah, okay, Councillor Matheson. Yes.
Yeah, could we, could you explain exactly what an informal priority system, what that exactly means, please?
Do you want to ask Sam to answer that? It's entirely up to you. Just explain it. Would you do that for us, please, if it's in this case? Thank you. Sorry, we're just waiting for internet.
Thank you. Councillor, the informal priority system is at present very similar to what it is now, the informal priority system. We have originally, the original design that came forward was a formal priority system, but this will be decided when we come to the detailed design for the scheme when it comes under the Section 278 of the Highways Act.
Yes, I mean, unfortunately, I I and the officer didn't actually look at that on my private site visit.
Excuse me, Councillor, we don't want to
an
debate on
arrow?
it. You asked the question
Well, what I mean
and
is
you've got
it
an
an
answer.
arrow? What have you got? There's an arrow saying there's priority this way or that way, so that vehicles know what to do.
Within an informal priority system, it's basically a give-take, as in you don't have any arrows or anything else. It's as existing at the moment. There is an informal priority system at the moment.
Thank you. Councillor Humphreys.
Madam Chair, thank you. It's just a question regarding one of the parts of the information we requested at the last meeting, and that was regarding the accident in 2016 not recorded on the crash map. I wonder if you got an update of that and also the outcome of it. Thank you.
We have no information of an accident back in 2016, I'm afraid.
Any further questions for the officer? Yes, Councillor Carter, thank you.
Regarding the footpath, I was just, do we take in consideration the average width of a motorised wheelchair and average width of a push pram? Pram.
We do. The Manual for Streets document says for wheelchairs, a 1 metre wide footway is allowable for a short duration. This, as we know that 1 metre isn't our ideal specification, but it is wide enough for a wheelchair and for a buggy, but it's not wide enough for 2 people to pass. But this was considered that the amount of pedestrian traffic that will be using it, and for a short section, this will be sufficient.
Thank you. Yes, one further question, please.
Just regarding, if we did happen to have a motorised wheelchair, which is about 36 inches wide, and a buggy, which on average is about 37 inches wide, which of the two is likely to have to step down from the curb in front of the traffic?
I think that's a bit of an unfair question to the officer, but your point is raised and we can use that in debate. Would that be satisfactory for you, Councillor? Thank you. Councillor Warboys. Could you put your microphone on, please?
Yes, beg your pardon. There has been a traffic survey done at peak time, and there's just over 200 vehicles travelling along that road at peak time. I didn't see any indication whether this was a tidal flow, whether the majority of the traffic was flowing in one direction, say in the morning, and in the opposite direction in the evening. I'm assuming from what's said that the traffic is going both ways. So wouldn't a further constriction on this pinch point actually increase the chances of traffic building up in either direction?
Can you turn yours off?
Thank you. The tidal, if it was about 300, it's 150 vehicles each way. I haven't got the information in front of me, I'm afraid. But when I've been on site in the peak hour, I've only seen about 3 cars maybe waiting at that pinch point before the other car's gone past. That is my own personal one on the day that I was there at the peak hour. I'm afraid I can't tell you if there was any other congestion. We didn't ask the transport assessment for the queue lengths because it wasn't deemed necessary at the time.
Councillor Norris? Sorry, Councillor Warboys, you've finished your questioning. I mean, we're not debating, we're questioning.
Yes, not quite, because that's the current situation. If this development were to carry out, there'd be further traffic on that road. I think the assumption is there's 42 houses, so there could well be 42 extra vehicles on that road. Has the design taken into account that extra number of vehicles?
regard to trip rates for this scheme, for 42 dwellings, we times that by 0.6 because it's a rural community. So therefore, it's about, you estimate, or it is considered that there will be approximately 26 trip rates in the peak hour period, which will be one every 2 minutes. So that isn't considered a huge amount for this area.
Thank you. Councillor Norris and then Councillor Field, and anyone else that I haven't caught my eye.
Thank you. Yes, going back to what's referred to as an informal traffic priority system, is it intended to have any signs indicating who has priority, or a sign such as one sees about oncoming traffic in the middle of the road or similar?
Yes, at present there are signs saying traffic oncoming in the middle of the road. There is a informal priority system there at present. As I said before, when we get to section 278 of the agreement with the developer for the footway works, it will be safety audited, and the safety audit will pick up anything that they deem necessary to change the design. But the previous design was a priority system, and the safety auditor deemed that at present the informal priority system works very well, so not to put the priority system in.
Councillor Field, thank you.
Thank you. 2 or 3 questions. I'll try them one at a time. First of all, the officer pointed to an established footpath on the opposite side of the main road to the development. I wonder if you could point out where that footpath ceases.
Thank you for your question. So in terms of the footpath opposite the site, it's on an elevated position over the road, and it finishes in this approximate position here, as marked.
So it's in an elevated position.
Only marginally from the road. I think there's a small verge, approximately 2 feet, that's elevated from the actual bound carriageway.
Right, quite good for wheelchairs and things then. And it stops, do you know how far short of the pinch point that stops?
I think we're looking circa 8 metres. When we're on site, it actually slopes off either end. I think, you know, further up towards Duke of Marlborough, you have flatter, lower lying vehicular highway and indeed pedestrian highway.
So I'm looking for the distance from it to the pinch point, and it passes at least 3 buildings, so 8 metres sounds a bit short to me.
Right, I'm measuring the end of the footpath on the opposite side of the road to the site to, well, when you say pinch point, it's an argument of where that starts, but let's say to the building that overhangs, that's about 40 metres.
Thank you.
Bearing in mind, we obviously have the public footpath on the opposite side of the road, and the point of this development is its burden on the area, not the existing situation. So the alternative is available for the existing properties, the new properties.
The suggestion was people had an option of crossing to that footpath and using it, merely making sure councillors are aware of the constraints on such use. The second thing was you mentioned the public right-of-way which exists along the edge of the allotments at this lower edge of the site. I wonder if the officer could explain what the characteristics of that right-of-way are. Is it flat, or is it sloping? Is it surfaced, or is it unsurfaced?
So the public right-of-way is typical of the countryside location. It's a varying mix in terms of grassed areas, gravel, and indeed mudded areas. I think I've got a photo here, so I will. That's towards the south, facing west with the site on the right hand side. You can see the fencing looking into site, and this would be down towards the south-eastern corner along the public right-of-way, which I hope gives an idea of what is here.
But you don't have a picture of it from Main Road, the steepness of the slope?
I don't, I'm afraid, no.
Thank you. The next issue would be, to me, the nature of the area you described as the yellow marked area, the proposed footway. How is that constructed?
That will be decided when it comes to section. Have a number of options where it could be just a coloured surface, it could be a 50mm high, which is 2 inches high curve face, it could have 80mm curve face. It's something, when it gets to detailed design, it will be decided at that point. But there are a number of options that we could choose. At the moment, I do believe that it's showing 50mm curve face, so it's a 2-inch drop. But there have been some ideas, as I said, floating around the office as into what it could be constructed of.
Thank you, Councillor Field. Thank you. You.
Can I just carry on?
Oh, I thought you only had 3 questions. Sorry. Can you put your microphone on?
Yes, it was. The width of the road at the moment, we were talking about, you were explaining an informal priority system. I understand the road is to be 3.5 metres wide. Is that adequate to support two-way direction traffic? And is it currently supporting two-way traffic?
At the present time, there is sufficient room for 2 cars to pass. There isn't sufficient room for a car and a lorry to pass. So this is when there's the informal priority. Where we are suggesting to put the footway, it will narrow it down to a single carriageway. It will be a definite, there is no room for 2 cars to pass. A lorry can pass 3.5 metres. The only thing would be difficult would be for a combine to pass 3.5 metres, but there they will be able to overhang a footway. I don't know if a combine goes through there now. But at the present time, there's enough room for 2 cars to pass, but at a squeeze. So by reducing it down, it'll be just down to 1 car, and a lorry can pass through.
Thank you. Could you just explain to me how an informal priority system works when a driver at one end of such system cannot see the vehicle at the opposing end?
At present, it's working very well. At present, people can see, cannot see. The informal priority system, there are a number across Suffolk County. As we said before, when it comes to Section 278 of the agreement, we will decide, it will be safety audited out, and we will have a look at if a priority system should be introduced into the area.
Thank you.
Councillor Field, I mean, I don't want to sort of labour the point all on highways, but how many questions have you got? Because it is unusual for ward members to sort of take over the meeting, but I'm prepared to let you keep going because it's very interesting and informative.
It's good to be unusual, I guess. I was merely trying to ensure there are people opposite understand the situation fully. I did have one other question, perhaps. The MPPF states that something should be rejected on highways ground if there would be an unacceptable impact on highway safety. I would just ask the officer's professional opinion on that point.
All the information that was provided by the applicant showed that there isn't severe impact on highway safety. There is an alternative route for the pedestrian for them to be able to make to the village with the public rights of way.
Would point out there isn't an alternative route. There is a public right of way, but it ceases. But that's debate on.
So if I may just add a couple of things in respect to those questions. Firstly, you mentioned the surfacing of the public right of way. On page 24 of the report, you will see that part of this proposal does include surface improvement works to the public rights of way, and that would effectively upgrade those paths to be more suitable for various users. I would also just mention that we are the local planning authority. We are not the highways authority. There is a certain limit to what we can do before we do have to trust that a different authority with its own responsibilities needs to consider the finer details. And we can't design a highway scheme. We don't have the experts to do so. But I will leave it there before I go too much further.
Right. Councillor Carter, is this a question? We're not into debate yet. We haven't had all the presentations from people that are available.
I did wonder, should a combine be coming through and overhanging a path, the path being utilised at the time by a motorised wheelchair without the possibility of crossing over, without the possibility of moving out of the way, who has right of way and who has to move back? Would a combine have to reverse out of the way for the wheelchair to get across the road and out of a distance, or what would happen there?
I would hope that a combine harvester driver would be considerate of the pedestrian and somebody maybe in a wheelchair or in a motorised wheelchair. I've met many a combine driver, thank you very much.
I think John just wants to add a little extra to that. Thank you.
I think it's very clear to everybody, let's be quite frank about this, this is not the perfect road. It is not wide enough to meet every modern day standards or particular types of vehicles. There are issues in respect to this road. The issue before us in terms of a planning application is whether this application and the nature of the traffic likely to be associated with it in the long term would be so detrimental and so severe in its impact to warrant refusal. So I would caution exploring the existing situation to the nth degree. I would be careful in your balance of what is reasonable and day by day.
Thank you. Now, has anyone any further questions for the officer? Thank you very much. And so we now move on, if we may, please. And we have the parish councillor, James Caston, please.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So the Parish Council's discussed this application and also discussed the proposed road layout. I'd like to firstly go through quickly some of the issues and then talk about this main issue of the pinch point on the road. So the residents have drawn our attention to an issue of a sewer pipe that is frequently blocks running down from the site. The visual displays at the Duke of Marlborough we consider to be inadequate. The traffic statement evidence was gathered between 0700 and 0800 and 1600 and 1700. We have information from our road safety advisor that we find that to be inaccurate, and peak times are 0730 to 0845 and similar in the evening. The houses on Stocks Hill have no foundation, and any building here would have to, the builders would have to take special measures to protect them. But the major issue we have is with this pump house corner, the pinch point. The parish council looked at the proposed changes to the road layout and unanimously agreed they not only wouldn't solve the problem, they would increase the risk. The footpath actually moves vehicles over to the inside of the corner, reducing the point at which they see each other. We consider 3.5 metres as being unsafe for lorries and agricultural equipment that quite often carry a 3 metre wide implement on the back. They would have to cut the bend to avoid the overhanging houses on the other side. It is not safe in this form. Also, the footpaths on Stocks Hill, Councillor Field was talking about the entry onto the road. I wouldn't be able to push my mother-in-law's wheelchair up that hill, and I'm fairly physically strong in my 30s and a farmer. I just couldn't do it. The only way this can be made safer is to straighten the road to increase the visibility. The road is that road is dangerous, and by developing this area, we are pretty much locking the door and throwing away the key on any improvements ever to be made to that corner. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to not build on the part where the road could be straightened, and the road that could be made safer. So, yeah, thank you very much. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you for that, James. Any questions for Councillor? No? Thank you very much for the input. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairman.
We now move on to Mr. Andrew Loughlin, please. And if you'd like to come along and present your case. Thank you.
Thank you for letting me speak. We've got a couple of images which will be shown as and will be referred to in this comment. So, I will continue. Suffolk County Council Highways does not consider the impact of introducing a 1 metre footway as being a severe risk. In fact, they consider it to be a betterment. But to reach that conclusion, they have refused to consider the impact of anything other than off-peak traffic flow and have relied on so-called professional opinion and unreliable statistics. No one within the authority has been prepared to give credence to practical local knowledge. To date, all road assessments have been during off-peak time. The Suffolk County Council Highways Review, the Road Safety Audit, and even the committee's on-site review have all taken place late morning. No one has assessed the risk during peak time traffic flows when 220 plus vehicles pass through the Stocks Hill main road section of Mill Lane. Why has there been an irrational reluctance to do this? Because the cumulative impact would then come into play, and it would be impossible to suggest that the impact of a footway proposal is anything but severe. We'll take a look at the images. Image 1. This woman is moving through the section where the footway is proposed to be. She's also
Can I just interrupt just before we start? Just to explain to members, we're only going to have two photographs that you're going to put up. So if members could look at them, we'd be grateful. Thank you. I've stopped your clock.
No, thank you very much.
I've forgotten which way up it was now. I'll give you the longer side.
Thank you. Image 1. This woman is moving through the section where the footway is proposed to be. She's also taking a child. If she was taking a child to school, would you expect the child or the pushchair to be next to the traffic? Where would the mother and child retreat to when the arriving cars seek to avoid a collision? Who's the most expendable? Because somebody will need to be. Lost my phone. Sorry, I'm wasting my time. I had an image too, but I'm not showing it. But this has a cyclist moving at speed. If you imagine, use your imagination to consider oncoming vehicles are now travelling in the 3.5 metre route. The cyclist won't see the vehicle. Does the cyclist survive unscathed? Probably not. Images 3 and 4, we're showing just one of those images. Large vehicles must also use the full width of the road to negotiate the pinch point. There are daily near misses. We accept the reported accidents are low, but a 3.5 metre roadway will turn those near misses into accidents. Reported accidents to date are not a reflection of the true dangers. Near misses haven't even been considered. A main road is not a rural road. Why? Because off-peak surveys will not pick up the severity of this, but they will allow planning policy and NPPF paragraphs to be favourably interpreted. Perhaps we're being naive, but surely planning policy and NPPF paragraphs are there to ensure due diligence in the process, and that at least the outcome upholds public and property safety. We can only conclude that the sanitised assessment is designed to support an underlying agenda to approve this development at all costs. Otherwise, why has there been this unreasonable and irrational reluctance to be thorough? We feel that both district planning and county highways, by not diligently challenging the proposal, are irresponsibly risking the safety of the residents of Somersham and surrounding villages. And to be frank, no one in the authority seems to care. So, in conclusion, Suffolk Highways consider this to be a betterment. How can it be an improvement when pedestrians and cyclists will be put at risk of being run over? It doesn't offer inclusive access. The risk of vehicle head-on, sideswipe collisions and collisions with heritage assets will increase.
Can you conclude
Residents
now,
will be
please?
placed...
Can you conclude?
I've only got just a couple of sentences.
Well, can you conclude? Yeah, finish off. Yes, your 2 cents.
Residents will be placed in danger when leaving home. The visibility of oncoming traffic will be further reduced. Where was the due diligence in the process? Where is the balanced review of risk? Where's the betterment? So on those grounds, we ask this planning application is refused. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I will ask members if they do have any questions. I have a question for you. I'm very well aware of the passion and the involvement that you have in this case, and I've read every email that's come in on it from yourself. Has your property been hit over the last how many years?
Because I've been there twice. It's been hit. It was hit, unfortunately, by James's father in his one of his vehicles when I first moved into the property. It was hit again after that, but since then it hasn't been hit. But it's come very close. Well, tell a lie. We have had it scraped by a bus on the section that overhangs the road. So they've got very, very close. And
I'm sure you've read the report very thoroughly, as we all have. And there is an item there, and it alludes to the highways things, and you have to understand that the planning committee relies on the highways telling us. And there is an area for section 278 to be engaged with the developer and yourself. Have you read that bit earlier, that bit of the report? And are you aware that if that fails, then no matter what the decision of this committee is, it would also fail at that point? Are you aware of that?
No, I was.
Well, I'd just like to point that out.
Okay, I was aware that it was there, but my concern was that it came after the approval stage.
It is something that can. It depends how the committee vote on this, but it is something that the committee would give the planning officer the authority to deal with, and if it fails at that point, am I correct, John, that would...
We are... Do you mind?
Yeah. Want you to be aware of something.
Ultimately, if something fundamental comes out of the section 278, the Highways Authority have the power to stop that work, not allow it to go ahead. What I'm keen on is making sure there's a connection between that and the development itself not going ahead, regardless of that. So my advice to members, I mentioned earlier that we would obviously need to secure the footway works and the protection to the pump cottage building. I would actually propose to members that that is all sealed and agreed, and the section 278 is sorted prior to commencement of the building, if members wanted to, in order to ensure that that development goes no further, subject to the highway works. I had got it down as prior to occupation because it's normally the use of the buildings that causes the burden of the development, but in this case I see no reason why we can't make it prior to commencement. It does mean that we would have to seek agreement from the applicant for that condition, because it's a prior to commencement condition, but we can do that if that's where members go in the debate.
And can you turn your microphone off? But I used it as a question to get the point forward. Okay, thank you. You're now aware of it, of course. Yes, thank you. Any, yes, Councillor Humphreys.
Madam Chair, thank you. Two questions. The first question is the timing of the traffic contradicts what the councillor said. You said it's done late morning. The councillor said it was done between 7 and 0800, which is correct.
No, sorry. No, the traffic peak time.
Can you switch your microphone?
I thought it was. Sorry. The peak time traffic is, as James has mentioned, is between 7:30 and 8:45. The assessments have been late morning. So the on-site assessment to actually witness the traffic have been late morning.
I don't think that's true. I think it's done between 07 and 0800 as stated by the parish councillor. But that's my opinion.
I'm
My
sorry,
second
what I'm saying.
second question.
Could I just clarify
No,
the point?
my second question
Because
is
it's
the
wrong.
woman and a baby, would you not actually conclude, just to give balance to your point, that if there was a footpath there, they would be safer?
No, because the footpath, the footpath is at the moment it's proposed as a painted line. It's not anywhere mentioned that if it was a 2-inch upstand, it would become even more of a hazard because the vehicles would then be mounting it. And we saw what happened in 2016 when the vehicle hit the curb and turned over. It's hit the edge of the...
Thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Warboys. And can you all just remember to switch on and off because we can't get...
Oh, sorry.
I'm on. Just a couple of questions. Your building's a listed building, isn't it? It's a grade 2? And it's a jetted building, I understand. So the second story projects further into the road than the ground floor. How far approximately? 400 millimetres, about half a metre. Okay, thank you very much.
I mean, just to, I think to avoid a misunderstanding, if I just the exchange between the Vice Chairman and this speaker, the speaker was saying that he agrees with Mr. Caston. I'm calling James Mr. Caston because although he's one of our district councillors, he's not here in that capacity today. He's a parish councillor. Yeah. The parish council's. You're saying you agree with the parish council statement as to when the peak time for traffic is, which is 7 a.m. to 8:45. Did I get that right? I didn't write it down.
7:30 to 8:45.
And your concern and your criticism is that you do not believe that the assessments have been made with reference to data at that time. Is that right?
That's right.
So that was your worry about being misunderstood. Okay, I thought we'd better just go back to that.
Right, where are we? Any further? No? If you'd like to return to your seat. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. And we don't have a supporter, and we now have the applicant or the agent, Mr. Chris Smith, please.
Yeah, do you want to do?
I'll just because I just.
And just before, please do come down. But just before you do, there is a comment.
Well, I think Mr. Papengee's just drawing my attention that I wanted to make sure that the speaker hadn't been misunderstood, and I've done that. But I think the point's being made to me that there is the county councillor saying they in writing that they have done it, and that may have been Councillor Humphrey's point. Yeah. So.
Just drawing members' attention to page 83 of your papers. I'll let you read that to understand it in that respect, but they've reviewed the transport assessment, and that is in respect of AM peak times being taken into account and PM peak times. That's what they have assessed.
Thank you. If you'd now like to have your 3 minutes. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Councillors, my name's Chris Smith. I'm Development Planner for Hopkins and Moore. Following the previous deferral at the July Committee, as you've heard, and as requested by yourselves, we met with the officers of Suffolk County Council Highways on site at the end of July, walked the route concerned and agreed through a series of drawings the proposals that are now in front of you and which we sent to you along with the layout plan ahead of this committee meeting. As you've heard, those details have been agreed in principle with officers as the best possible compromise in this situation to enable improved pedestrian linkages from the west of the site to the east for the benefit of both existing and future residents, and at the same time seek to slow the traffic and control the traffic as best as possible in the situation to avoid incidents and indeed improve the situation over what currently exists. So on that basis, given that you were previously comfortable with the remainder of the proposals, we trust that you are able to concur with the officer's recommendation and support the proposals. That's all I really wanted to say, but as always, I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Do members have any questions? Don't appear to. Thank you very much indeed. And now we come on to Councillor Field as ward member, please. Thank you.
Thank you. First of all, perhaps apologise that I didn't put a written submission in till yesterday, so councillors may not have had quite enough time to read that. No one was really struggling for something really constructive to say about the process. I think after the last meeting, in which the application was deferred for further work on safety issues, I expected evidence of significant effort and clear application of highways engineering skill. I feel the new proposals fall far short of those needed to persuade the community that the development is acceptable and to ensure that the requirements of the MPPF are met. Particularly those requirements are the ones that state an application should be refused on highways grounds if there would be an unacceptable impact on highway safety. That goes on to say, or the residual cumulative impact on the road network would be severe. I feel the judgment's been made on the second criteria of those two, but the first relating to safety appears to be given little weight. It appears to me also that there's been no engagement with the community, and highways emails that I've seen appear to state that there's no resource to accomplish that, despite the value of this development. It clearly would add substantially to the local economy. To go on to the current proposal, so you have before you a proposal to put a footway on the right-of-way in place, a footway on the right-of-way in place, together with a painted footway on Stocks Hill side of Main Road and an informal one-way system. Residents are not impressed with that. The footway is on a steep rise at the Main Road end and appears to be on private land, not under the applicant's control. The on-road footway, a shared space I guess, is, as County Highways point out, narrow, but its main issue is that pedestrians are unprotected. Paint on the road provides little security. Physical curves would be preferable, but it's difficult to place, as they would compromise road use by large vehicles. I think I did provide a couple of pictures of large vehicles at that position. The footway is 30 metres long. It would take about 22.5 seconds for a fit pedestrian, unimpeded by a child or any mobility difficulties, to pass that length. If they set off in a gap in the traffic, which they could see at best some 220 metres away, a vehicle at 30 miles an hour would travel 300 metres towards them, somewhat bigger than the difference they've got. the footway placed as proposed would also move traffic towards the listed buildings which have an overhang which is known to be vulnerable. It would appear more appropriate that if the footway were on the King's Cottage side, as it would move traffic away and protect the overhang. The one-way system is informal, as drivers entering either end, those with priority or not, would not be able to see the vehicle entering from the opposite end. I find it difficult to see how we might imagine that that would work. So there, you know, clearly at the moment, for large vehicles it works. Large vehicles are clearly moving very slowly, and there is a form of refuge between the two listed buildings in which vehicles of some size can escape. I guess otherwise it's just a matter of hoping that random events, the occurrence of two large vehicles at the same place at the same time, are fairly unlikely. My feeling is that some form of signalling between the ends of any fully operational priority system would be essential. Traffic controlled lights would appear to be a solution, although they're not acceptable normally in a rural village. This analysis suggests to me that there would be an unacceptable impact on highway safety were the development to go ahead with the highways measures as they are currently defined. I'm reluctant to propose improvements as I'm not a highways engineer. However, the parish believe a minor realignment to Main Road on the development side of King's Cottage and placement of the footway on the King's Cottage side of the road would allow vehicle intervisibility and the priority one-way system to be implemented safely. That would allow residents of the development to adopt sustainable modes of transport. And that, I think, is the prime issue we're considering. At the moment, at the meeting, if the meeting is determined to proceed with the current highways design, then at minimum a 20 miles per hour zone should be put in place to improve pedestrians' chance of survival if or when an accident occurs. So my conclusion is the revisions to this application do not address adequately the issues of the unacceptable impact on highway safety that arise from the need for pedestrian traffic from the proposed development to transit the section of Main Road in front of King's Cottage and the pump house. And therefore I feel this application should be rejected, at least until the highways issues are resolved. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Field. We will go to questions. You've made some interesting points that I've actually raised myself, but I think you've made it quite clear we are not the Highways Authority, and that is where we've got to consider our debate today. But thank you for sending us the paper copy and thank you for your information earlier. So does anyone have any further questions of the ward member? Councillor Richardson.
Thank you. I've got a couple of questions about the existing village. Firstly, do you have a rough approximation of how many people live in Somersham? And secondly, how do people, or pedestrians in particular, currently transit between the western half of the village by the Duke of Marlborough pub and the eastern half with the shop and the primary school?
I'm the district councillor of the area. I regret to say I don't know exactly how many people are in the village. I believe it's around 700, but I would be happy if the parish council corrected me on that. Clearly, at the moment, the people who live at the Duke of Marlborough end of the village walk through the existing pinch point to the facilities, you know, the recreation ground, the school, the village hall, the village shop. Clearly, that's what they do. Currently, as far as I'm aware, they walk on the King's Cottage side of the bend, and you can certainly take refuge between King's Cottage and the pump house in a slightly wider area of the road at that point. So at the moment they take the risk. They don't have any choice.
Any further questions? I just have one. Take the highways out of things. Generally, is the application, in your view, an acceptable one?
There's a parish council meeting tonight. I might say I'd rather not answer that. But the obvious truthful answer is villages always object to increases in housing. It changes their environment. I do tend to believe it's in an appropriate place and appears to be reasonably well laid out. So, yeah, I'm not personally averse to the development as it is. It's really just this impact of exacerbating a long outstanding safety issue, considerable risk to new people who would be moving in, who would wish to adopt sustainable transport modes to some facilities. Clearly they're going to drive to Ipswich or catch the bus. There's 4 of those a day, but you know, there are things locally which they wish to do and which I've seen people doing. So increase to that, to me, is unacceptable.
And one final question. What's been going on in the past to improve what you perceive as the current, and many others do, as the current issues? What has been going on with the district councillor there?
I've only been district councillor since May, so not a great deal. I'm fully aware that the previous county councillor spent a considerable time on this issue, looking at issues like vehicle activated signs, you know, changes to road configuration, whatever, and to my knowledge must have spent 8 years trying to get some movement. But there's always an issue of we're offsetting a known impact on someone's budget against a risk of an accident.
And one final question. Are you aware of the situation that arose at Woolpit with exactly the same?
I am.
Yeah, right, thank you. Thank you very much. So, we now move on to debate. So, whoever wants to start, you're most welcome. Councillor Gould.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Some of what I say is a kind of by way of a reminder to myself as a new councillor, new to the planning committee, and what it is that we can consider and what it is we have to put to one side. Clearly, regarding this application, there are matters of concern in relation to the highway prior to pre-existing this application. I'm minded also about the point that's been made a couple of times, that we are necessarily and properly reliant on the advice of the Highways Authority in coming to our judgment. So looking at this development in its own terms, as it were, it seems to me to be an appropriate development, that the relationship between the development and the highway through the splay and the access, which I understand the officer to say kind of exceeds minimum requirements, is to be welcome. Much has been said, questions asked in relation to informal traffic control measures. It's a shame that the Highways officer has left us, but I understand it to be the case that there is a trend in Highways policy towards informal arrangements and away from highly controlled, because the evidence is that this puts more responsibility on the driver, and behaviour is improved and accidents reduced. I don't have the authority for that. This is my understanding from what I've read. Councillor Field makes a proposal in relation, if this goes ahead, in relation to a 20-mile-per-hour zone. I understand that the Highways Authority is moving away from the introduction of 20-mile-per-hour zone. I have 2 within my ward, one in Ockholm, which has been there for some time, and the abuse of which dominates each parish council agenda. It's not, there's no enforcement associated with it. It seems to make no difference whatsoever to actual road discipline. And we've just had one introduced in I have to say the experience is the same. Those that heed traffic are diligent drivers remain diligent. Those who weren't are unaffected, it seems, by the presence of a 20-mile-per-hour zone. So I'm not sure that that would improve matters at all. So it seems to me that this proposal is a reasonable proposal, and I'm not sure also about Councillor Field's statement that villagers always object to development. Certainly, I don't think that's a universal truth and isn't true in my ward. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Shall I? Well, I was just going to say to remind members that it depends how the debate goes, of course, that the condition to put section 278 be acceptable before any commencement would be a condition that could be included as the debate goes forward. Councillor Gould, yes.
Yes, that was going to be one of my points, which I omitted to mention. That was that I would wish to see that as a condition prior to commencement.
That's very helpful, thank you. Right, who else would like to speak, please? Councillor Norris, thank you.
I'm unable to support this application for these reasons. It appears to me there is a lack of safe connectivity of the proposed development to local facilities, particularly with regard to the proposal to construct a 1 metre wide footway between the public right of way and the footway network adjoining a single carriageway with a width of only 3.5 metres, requiring what is referred to as an informal traffic priority system. Proposed footway of only 1 metre wide is not the Suffolk design standard of 1.8 metres width. In spite of what has been said about the highways aspects, I still have considerable concerns regarding public safety. Somersham Parish Council's comments on page 7 include the statement that in their opinion, whilst the present main road configuration is unsafe at the pinch point adjacent to King's Cottage Street Farm and the old post office, what is being proposed would make the situation significantly worse. This view is supported within the many objections from residents detailed on pages 9 and 10 and a petition against the proposed application with 164 signatures. An email received from an objector includes the comment that the public right-of-way from the proposed development to Stocks Hill narrows to a single-track rough walkway unsuitable for anyone other than able-bodied pedestrians. As regards sustainability and environmental health, have responded on page 9 with an objection stating that the proposal is too vague in its commentary around the sustainability benefits provided in relation to new build. And for these reasons, I cannot support this application. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor. Councillor Matheson.
Thank you. Yeah, this is undoubtedly a difficult one, and I mean, I think I go back to the agent who described the highways arrangements that had been come to as a compromise, and yes, it is. I think, to me, the question is that compromise good enough to outweigh the benefits of the affordable houses that we would get if it went ahead, and I'm not quite sure that it actually does it for me. It is it is worrying. I think we've understood that the parish, the local knowledge, hasn't been engaged directly in the trying to find the solution, if I understood Councillor Field correctly, and so that is a difficult balance. I wouldn't say I've decided which way to go, but I think that's the essential problem. Do the benefits outweigh the disadvantages, or are we taking an existing problem that the village has experienced for years and years already, and making it significantly worse? I think on the significantly worse side, I thought I'd picked up somewhere that the 42 dwellings was a 25% expansion of the village or something. I don't know whether that doesn't seem to be in the papers, but maybe it was an objector's letter or something. It is quite a significant expansion of a relatively small village.
Thank you for that, Councillor. Councillor Humphreys.
Madam Chair, thank you. One of the major attributes of Suffolk is the medieval villages that we have. Unfortunately, we've got modern vehicles and modern roads, and the two don't always mix. I really feel for you with your overhanging building. I think there is a risk there. Even with this footpath, it increases that risk. Unfortunately, near misses not reported. If they were, we might have a different conclusion here. However, I can tell you on the crash map that I went back 10 years and there were 2 incidents with vehicles at the Mill Lane and Main Road Junction, which had slight injuries, and it's a slight rating, but that's going back 10 years. I don't know how far back the highways go. In the 5 years, there was 1 actually in that area that's been recorded, and I know there's debate about where it was. But there have been incidents, there have been accidents, and it's quite likely that there may be more. And the reason for that is this, that if you're going to put down a footpath which is shared surface, which means there is no boundary between you and the road, you are on the road bar a line. So the situation you've got now, which is dangerous, because I've walked down there, it's not ideal, is pretty much the situation you're going to have when you put this new footway in. It's pretty much the same. It's a little bit wider, but actually that contributes to another problem, a consequence. The consequence is your building, in the fact that there is no maximum height of vehicles in the UK. However, they do say if whenever possible, they should be kept about 5.5 metres and no more. So they can be any size. If it's non-articulated and it's of maximum length and it's 2.5 metres wide, I would argue that coming around that bend, that causes significant risk to the overhanging Grade 2 listed building, and that to me is unacceptable and probable, which is the key bit. So that's a bit of an issue for me. The other thing is the vehicles that move along that road. We're getting increased traffic. That's human nature, and it's the way we're progressing. But the agricultural vehicles that use that road a lot, and I know this, as you said, can be 3 metres wide, which again causes that same problem in that pinch point to pedestrians, because there is no physical boundary between them and the road. And we're relying, exactly what you said, on drivers having common sense and decency. Unfortunately, common sense isn't as common as we'd like to think, and decency seems to be going out the window. So you can't guarantee either of those 2 points. Therefore, there is a risk to pedestrians. And I know it's not related to the development. I'll come on to that in a moment. So I've got real concerns over road safety. The word dangerous is, you have to quantify that. I've got real concerns. I think that's as far as I go on it. We'll go back to the development now. The visibility displays, even though people have said they're not happy with them, they're more than that's actually required. So the development itself, the visibility displays there, actually improves safety if we're going to have a development in that location. Secondly, it provides a footpath up to the pub, which is ideal, and more importantly, back from the pub, so it lessens the danger for people. It also connects the northern part and the southern part, if you like, of the village. It joins it together. As far as location goes, I think it's an ideal location for a development. If you're going to build in a village, that's probably the place you're going to build, right slap bang in the middle that connects the two together. So as far as the development goes, I have no concerns whatsoever. And I think actually it's a well thought out development, and really has made loads of compromises to improve the well-being of the people in the village currently, such as not building close to the Grade 2 listed building of the pub, putting a lagoon there, and also thinking about the elevations as well. So well done to the developers on that. Unfortunately, though, it keeps coming back to this highway safety issue, and I'll need guidance on that as to how important that is to this development approval or not, because to me, it just doesn't make sense. And you're right, we can clearly see, it's like the emperor's new clothes, isn't it? We can clearly see the issue. We need to say, let's sort the issue out, not just bypass it for the sake of this development. So at the moment I'm undecided, but I am swaying towards the refusal side based on safety and the fact that I don't think there's enough mitigation here to prevent an incident or an accident or damage to a property that's Grade 2 listed in the future.
Thank you. I think it's probably a good point to mention now that if members go for a minded to refuse, if that's the way the debate goes, I would put it to referrals. But that's just another little addition into the pot of what we are debating. So would anybody else like to speak, please? Councillor Warboys, thank you.
I think I must agree with quite a great deal of what Councillor Humphreys is concerned with relation to the actual site. Looking at it, it does look as a great deal of potential for actual development on that site. But as part of this development, a great deal of emphasis is put on its sustainability. And there's two aspects of this. I think the most significant one in this respect is its connectivity to the main part of the village. There has been a report on the peak traffic, which is 207 vehicles in the morning and 227 vehicles in the afternoon. And Highways did say that this is going to be increased by about 10%, 26 extra vehicles at this point. So that's one quite a significant, I think, impact. Though they say this would not have a severe impact, it is nevertheless, I think, a significant impact. And certainly the perception from the parish council is that it does cause a major concern. The other is the pedestrian access. It's already quite difficult. There's indications here of level crossings in the opposite direction to the people wishing to travel towards the primary schools and the other village services, or using a footpath which, though it may be improved, from my memory it serves as quite a steep drop down onto the main road before you get into the village. So it doesn't really encourage people to use sustainable means of transport, to use bicycles or to walk into the village. So on that aspect, I think there's quite a significant impact on the village, which doesn't make things better. It's not a positive impact. Now, one other aspect of sustainability, we have shown some details of the buildings. From what I've seen of the buildings, there's a minimal use of renewable materials, which actually sort of does add to the impact on the environment. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And while you were talking there, I was just made aware and checked and looked that in the joint local plan, this particular area has been marked as suitable for development. So, just as the debate goes forward.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think with that in mind in your comment earlier, this is a serious matter. I think there are serious concerns, and I think this does need to go to referrals. So how do I do that?
Right. But I will have my say first. I think the biggest problems we have as committees is not taking I'll rephrase that, is the highways are our authority. They are our professionals. We are not. But when we are local and we know what's happening, we have to make a decision on behalf of the community. And I keep harping back to the Woolpit appeal, and everybody threw their hands up in the air and said, oh, that was a 5-year land supply. No, it wasn't. It was about exactly this same issue of a narrowing of a road and listed buildings. And unfortunately, it was, as will be the case here, should it go for a refusal, against officer recommendation, and no barrister in the country would take it on. And everybody trumpeted and said it was the 5-year land supply. That wasn't the issue. It's got exactly the same problem. It's got a narrowing of a road. It's got farm vehicles. It's got increased traffic. Everything that we have here. A suggestion made by the ward member, and I actually wrote it on my bit of paper, could they not put the footpath on the other side of the road under the overhang? It seems to me there might be other solutions that maybe the highways can come up with. It's not up to us to do so. And I'm having difficulty with this, so I will, in my capacity, put this to referrals with the good grace, I hope, of the committee and the ward member and all the representatives here. So that's my decision of the thing. Thank you very much. So can we have a quick break? Is this relevant, John?
So
finished.
was that a decision?
Yes.
Oh, right, okay.
That is my decision. I have put this to referrals. That's it. Exactly. Because I can see the way the debate's going, we can see what the problems are.
Officers, so
Well,
can
no.
Did we get
Excuse me.
revised?
Excuse me, just a minute. Do I have further questions or not?
Yes, I mean, I think, Madam Chair, you've noted what every member who spoke has said, and your decision was made in light of that. It seems,
exactly.
You know, that's yes.
So I think, John, if you want any further questions, put them in writing to the officers when it sort of moves forward. Thank you. So if we can have a quick break now. Thank you very much indeed.